Maria had a question.
No, this is a very practical situation. We have had a small group of students from Besant Hill School this past year that we have met with every 2 to 3 weeks, just for studying what it means to be human. And we've used a text, and the papers that they've written recently about the experience have been positive. Some ideas have changed, their relationships have changed in various ways. It has been good for them. They want to continue next year. What they want to study, because one chapter especially intrigued them, was emotions. Let us learn about our emotions, they said. Now, given the idea that we want to create a learning, or bring about a learning mind in these teenagers, they are sophomores and juniors in high school, and a learning environment in each of our sessions with them, what are the sorts of things that we need to keep in mind with these girls? Also considering that there may be other students who may wish to join this inquiry. I would appreciate any insights that you might have from your own practical experience.
Could we have all 3 panelists answer that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
First of all, I think it should be a real question for that child. It should not be a question which I create, otherwise it becomes like philosophy and becomes more of an intellectual thing. So if he is feeling disappointed because he has lost a game, that's the time I would talk to him about this frustration, from where does it come, and talk to him about the joy of playing and this joy of feeling that I won. And why does the mind give tremendous importance to winning rather than to the joy of playing? So there you begin to, he begins to see that the manner in which he is approaching the game is causing this frustration. And in the same way, if he is experiencing boredom and therefore wanting to go to the internet or the TV and so on, you say, yes, that's fine, you will get over it by watching the TV, but tomorrow you will be bored again. So why not find out why are we bored? I also feel bored, but why are we bored? Have you ever thought about why we are bored? So whatever, he says something, and I say, yes, but there is that tree, there is the river, there is the book, there is your friend around the corner. Why are all these things not interesting? Why must you have something else which is more exciting? So long as you are you not also like an addict who is saying, I must have that? In which case, because all your attention is only towards that particular pleasure or excitement, therefore everything else fades and doesn't interest you anymore. So long as you don't take interest in everything in life, you will have boredom, because you're all the time wanting to cultivate stronger and stronger pleasures and so on. When you don't get it, you will be disappointed, you will be frustrated, upset. Similarly, you can discuss with him about desire when he experiences a strong desire and he can't get it. So give him a question like, what's the difference between a wish and a desire? You wish to meet a friend, you wish to go for a walk, you wish to have your meal. And when wishes are not fulfilled, it doesn't create frustration. But from where does this insistence come that my wish must be fulfilled? Supposing I learn to hold all desires like wishes, that if they can be fulfilled, that is fine. If they can't be fulfilled, I'll let go. It's not necessary. I'm not miserable without it. Like that. So you begin to point out that the manner in which you are approaching life and things itself is causing your grief or your boredom or your frustration and so on. Therefore learn learn to approach life differently. They begin to respond if you talk to them when they are experiencing that. They may not agree, may sleep over it and think about it maybe six months later that my teacher talked. You don't know when it will bloom, but you have sown a seed in his mind when you have pointed out that your own approach does this. Rather than only teaching him different ways of escaping from that problem. Escaping from boredom, which is easy. How to escape from boredom. The entire entertainment industry has come up for that. But it's important to be free. Not that you should not watch TV. You can watch, but you're not miserable without it. And therefore you're optionally watching. You don't need to. So this dependence on pleasure, that creates a problem.
Ruben, do you want to, oh, David, you wanted to answer that question?
Yeah, you know, it's such a huge question you've asked. There's so many dimensions to it. But I would just mention a couple of things. One is, very often, we're not even in touch with what our emotions are. You can't just presuppose, oh, I know that I'm afraid, and now what I'm going to do about it. Very often when we have fear and anxiety, we're only half aware of that fact. We're distracted because we're not giving attention to that. We're giving attention to that thing out there which is making us afraid, or all kinds of other things going on. So just to be aware of what the actual emotion is an important step. Very important. But then beyond that, I think in line with what Dr. Krishna was saying, Krishnamurti once said, envy is a precious jewel. Think what an extraordinary statement that is. Who else ever has said something like that? Envy is a precious jewel. Because in that you can learn so much. If you watch it, if you have that attitude towards it, that, my God, it's an extraordinary thing which is happening here. Then you're learning about it. Then you're fascinated by it. Then you're not just wanting to get rid of it, which is what ordinarily we do. And that's the learning mind, and that's the mind that can penetrate and see how that thing works inwardly. And from that, perhaps, move beyond it.
And he often talked about envy and greed. Those were two things to look at yourself, to see yourself and experiencing those feelings. Ruben, you were going to comment?
The only thing I would add would just be, in a clinical sense, an example would be a 15-year-old boy that I'm treating right now, whose mother has been ill with cancer since he was about 3. So his whole conscious life, his mother's been sick, and he's lived under that burden. And one of the consequences has been a constriction that he carries around in his belly, which is an emotional, physical constriction, where he's been wincing from this pain and the conflict between the parents, and he takes it on, of course, upon himself to not make any waves, to always be pleasant, to not add any distress to the family situation. So his whole emotional response to the world has become this knot of tension, and as a result, his head is hanging down, his voice is constricted, etc. So in a case like that, you know, we use yoga breathing actually and some yoga poses to see what it's like. What happens if you stand up straight? What happens if you are a warrior? What happens if you let your voice sink down instead of pushing it up into your head? What happens, and in his case we actually use a little bit of medicine to help release this chronic pattern of emotional constricting, to allow, and what comes of course up then is that he's angry. He's never had an opportunity to be angry because anger was unacceptable in that situation. So for him, instead of anger being a fearsome, awful thing that needs to be contained in your body and suppressed, suddenly it becomes an arc of an experience that is actually where all of his energy and passion is. So it's becoming friendly with something that has been not admissible up until now.
I would like to add something to that. See, we have been conditioned from childhood to think in terms of what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. And therefore one feels guilty when one feels envious or jealous, then it's a bad feeling or anger. So you suppress it. You don't learn about it. Whereas when Krishnamurti said it's a jewel, he says it's an opportunity for learning. So it's not a disaster. You don't want to just push it away, because it's also an opportunity for learning about it. Now learning means you watch how it builds up in you. You watch how it builds up in you, how that jealousy comes, from where it comes, and you discover that I'm comparing myself with another. And then if you have an inquiring mind, you say, why do I compare? Why does the mind compare? If you free your mind of comparison by observing and learning about it, that it creates, you'll unload a whole lot of negative feelings in the mind. You know, jealousy, envy, inferiority, feeling of superiority, hierarchy, everything comes out of this feeling of comparison. So it's like a disease. But to ask more deeply, why does my mind compare? Because we grow up with comparison. In school it has been promoted, in society it is promoted. All the time we are comparing two human beings and saying this man is smarter than this man and so on. So the child picks it up. But it is not inevitable. It's like a disease. But just because everybody has it, it feels normal. But actually speaking, it's not normal. Because out of it comes a lot of feeling of frustration and jealousy, and you're perfectly happy with your bicycle until your neighbor buys a car. Nothing has changed in your situation, but he got a car and now you're unhappy. That's very close.
Yes, please.
I have a practical question for all three panelists. What insights have you reached after all these years as to the best or optimal way to run a Krishnamurti school? As far as class size, administration, board of directors, how many on the board, that kind of thing. Practical details. What's the optimum?
First of all, let me give you a conversation I had with Krishnaji when he asked me to take charge of the school. I said, sir, if we really bring up children the way you have mentioned, will they grow up to be free? And he said, that question cannot be answered because it has never been tried. He didn't say our schools are trying it and so on. So he said it has never been tried. Because how do you create that atmosphere which he is talking about? Where do you get the teachers? They are also coming from university. They have grown up with competition, with this feeling that it's very important to do well in something, etc., etc. Fear, reward and punishment, everything. And they come here, now you introduce to them what Krishnamurti has said, what is our school philosophy and so on. It takes quite a while for them to really become part of it. Initially they just accept it as a policy. So it requires a transformation of the mind in the people. So that's why the teachers and the grown-ups in the school also have to be learning. It's not just the child, because in these respects we are not different. We have problems of fear and desire like the child has. His fears may be different and my fears may be different, but the problem of fear is common to the adult and to the child. So you are not in a position to say that I have solved this and I am teaching you how to solve this. But you can create the question and learn together with him. So that it's not easy to do all this. The teacher himself is not free. He himself doesn't fully understand that. That's the difficulty.
Yes. David had a lot of examples in his book of different arrangements that were tried.
Yes, of course you try, because you know what you want to do. It's the right direction to go. But I'm saying it's very difficult to realize it in practice. to have it happens halfway because you are attempting it. It does happen, you do. There is not active reward and punishment. So the children are not oppressed and they have a happy childhood. This I think all the Krishnamurti schools have attained. The children like to be in school. In many schools that is not true. They don't want to be there. The parents have sent them, the teachers are harassing them, but they have no outlet. So it's really not a school for them, it's a prison. But in a Krishnamurti school, the children are happy, they want to be there. So that is certainly the atmosphere where they like to be there and they are learning in a happy atmosphere, which is a great thing. But then all these other aspects of self-knowledge and religious inquiry and so on, and freeing oneself of the self-interest, those not easy to accomplish.
So Rockwood Park was started in 1969, I believe, and now we're 2012, so it's lasted this long. There must be some reason why it succeeded.
It doesn't become right because it succeeds, and it doesn't become wrong because it fails. It is intrinsically right to bring up children that way. So you must attempt it.
And I believe there are other schools that are trying to model themselves on the Krishnamurti schools. I know there's one in the Philippines.
See, what value do you put on giving a happy childhood? Isn't childhood also a stage of life, and shouldn't that be happy? Just as youth should be happy, old age should be happy. So shouldn't childhood be a happy experience? But very often children are being pushed around and harassed, and they are not happy because of the adults around them.
If there are no other questions, I might have one for the panelists, and then we might wrap up. But are there any other questions? Because, yes, the Dharmas.
Yes, I'm curious to know if any Krishnamurti school around the world has tried teacher training first. Only after the teachers have successfully called, because I'm not sure what that would mean or how you test it, but finished at least an introduction course to Krishnamurti's teachings, would they then actually teach?
In India, they are on the anvil of creating such a course. The difficulty is that the teachers who are on the job are working in the school, right? Now, who will come as students in this course? Because there are, unless that certificate from that course is recognized by all the other schools and so on, and therefore they take them as teachers, it will virtually mean that we have to take them, all the students who come for such a course. So there are those practical difficulties in creating that course, because that course needs to be recognized, and the government courses are recognized, though they are very ineffective. The way we have been training is that the teacher joins us as a prospective teacher, so that he stays in the school environment and works with the other teachers and so on for a year or two, and then if he likes it and we find that he is the right kind of teacher to have, then he is confirmed as a regular teacher. So it's a kind of on-job training, you can say, but not a separate course. Not a separate course.
Oh boy, now we have three. I'm going to ask Dan to ask his question, and if we have time, I'll come back to the two of you.
When Krishnamurti was in the process of establishing these schools and talking to you all, and trying to figure out how it was going to be done, giving recommendations and guidance, in retrospect, either in your experience as a student, in retrospect, is there anything you recommended that you think is wrong?
Many things. I went and asked him, sir, because we don't take government grant, our children come only from very rich families because the entire school has to be funded from the fees. Doesn't it mean that you are getting children only from the elite class and not doing anything for the poorer? And he said, sir, don't divide it like that. The rich are conditioned and they need to be free of their conditioning. The poor are also conditioned, they also need to be free of their conditioning. So don't divide it as doing it for the poor or the rich, like that. But those problems exist, no? What do? You have to have a financial viability. If you take government grant, there is one set of problems because they bring in all their rules and regulations, which means you cannot really be a Krishnamurti school. If you are a private school, the fees has to be high because all the salaries, the teachers and everything else have to come from the fees. You have to decide what you can do under the circumstances. So the ideals remain only conceptual. In actual fact, you have to work with reality. But the direction in which you are going, the vision, that has to be clear. And then you have to take very realistic decisions based on your situation, where you are educated.
In the category that I think you're suggesting, which is basic principles of educational philosophy, nothing really springs to mind of that kind. But in the process of implementing that in the actual school, Krishnamurti made decisions about people, for example, who to put in what job, or how to organize the administration of the school. And yeah, he made decisions that I was rather skeptical of, and which in time may have proven to be not the wisest. But at the same time, I kind of, he had a little bit of an experimental attitude, He knew that he didn't know for sure what was going to work out or who would be the right person for the right thing. So he said, look, this looks good, let's try it. Give this guy a chance, see what happens. And it didn't work out. He was flexible enough to change it. And, that spirit, that attitude, I think was probably healthy.
In terms of general principles, the general direction of the school, you all remain believers.
No. You should hear what I was told when I was appointed. I was appointed just when Krishnaji was dying. So I was told, you're very fortunate that Krishnaji is not around to come back in 3 years and throw you out.
Rueben, you have something to add to that?
No, really not. I can't think of anything fundamental about the school I went to that was wrong in its vision.
Well, that's wonderful.
No, not in the vision.
The contrast to the public high school, which I also had come from, was so stark that it was really like day and night in terms of an educational experience.
Jeff always asks provocative questions, so we'll take that last. That will be the last question, and since he's president of the board here, we'll take his question, and then we'll wrap it up.
This may seem a little bit obvious, but do you see a big difference in the way the school runs without, it's been a long time since Krishnamurti has been gone. Is it very different, or can the principles still be followed, or do you really need that leader or that energy that's alive, rather than just a series of principles or theories about how things should be conducted? Because he was very involved. Like you said, he talked to the kids.
It runs much better now.
Differently.
It runs much better now.
Oh.
That's a factual answer. Because we'll have to stand on our own feet and not depend on him. Right? That's been a big difference. And also, when you had a leader like that, whatever you may have said about no authority and all that, because he is the founder and there was a lot of palace politics kind of thing going on around him. And all that has disappeared. So it's much better, the atmosphere, in actual fact, as far as running schools is concerned.
Right, but
We are missing the teachings. The contact with the teachings, the study centers suffer, and the contact of this kind of learning, his inputs are not there. But in other respects, in terms of organizing the school, running it, and so on, it's much better than before. The relationships between the foundations is much better also, because you're no longer vying with each other for his attention. All that is not because we are wiser, because circumstances easier.
Well, thank you very much for a fascinating discussion. Really, each of you has added so much to what we think about Krishnamurti, the philosophy, teachings, and I want to thank everyone in the audience for being here, because that was very important also, your questions and your presence. And I think what Krishnamurti was trying to share with us was not in vain, because the fact that we're all here and still talking about this years later and really discussing the importance of it, I think it means he had some very innovative and important things to share with humanity. And I do mean humanity, not just a little select group in Ojai or at Brockwood. There was something to be learned from Krishnamurti. So thank you very, very much for being here.